Howdy, welcome to Making Headlines. I'm Nayeli Carrillo. Today we're going to be talking about how we know what we know and building relationships in groups by analyzing the popular TV show The Walking Dead and their main character, Rick Grimes. Grimes' relationships in the show and his communication to his group determine how they fare in the fictional post-apocalyptic world.
We tell ourselves that we are the Walking Dead.
To give a little background, I was about 5 years old when The Walking Dead first came out, and I was there every Sunday to watch the newest episode. So I think I'm pretty qualified to talk about Rick, and as I usually watch it every now and again from beginning to about season 6, and we'll get to that later. But first, I will be giving you a little background about the TV show. The Walking Dead was first aired in 2010 on AMC, and it has amassed a very big following of fans that have really different age groups, because right now you can see The Walking Dead on Netflix and other streaming platforms, as well as their other spin-offs. Before we get into the meat of this podcast, I'm going to be giving you a little spoiler disclaimer. And by sharing one of my favorite lines of all time, which is, Don't care. Where's Rick?
Where's Rick?
Which really just means that Rick is the main character who we will be talking about today. So Rick Grimes, in the first episode, we see him as a sheriff's deputy in somewhere in Georgia. I'm not too sure. But he is injured and he wakes up from a coma in the hospital. And when he wakes up, he basically has to get accustomed to this whole new world. And basically he has to traverse through the halls of this hospital, and he sees the first walkers that we see in the show, and it really shows his strength, because what kind of man can survive about 40 days in the hospital in a coma? At the end of the very first episode, we also see Rick going into the streets of Atlanta to try to find his family, because that's his motivation the whole entire time in the TV show, is trying to save his family. But in the first episode, he's just trying to find them. So he goes into Atlanta, and that's whenever he meets a horde of walkers, and he is on his horse, and that's one of the most iconic Walking Dead sequences, whenever he's on his horse and he's being chased by a horde of zombies. But when it comes down to it, it is Glenn who saves him, and Glenn is one of the most loved characters in all of the seasons. So whenever Rick eventually gets back to his family, they have this very tearful reunion, because they thought he was dead, and he basically came back from the dead. And it goes to show that the zombies signify more than just being zombies. So at one point in season 1, him and his new group, which has his wife, his son, and other people that they found, they make their way to the CDC, which they think is one of the safest places, and that will have the cure and will have answers. And when they get there, they find this doctor, and he's the only one there. And at the very end, when he's about to explode, the doctor's about to explode the CDC, he whispers something to Rick that he decides to keep to himself. And that ties back to the idea of how we know what we know and how we share information in a group. That relates to the hidden profile, which is when not all the information is shared and is being held by a singular person. The information that he was holding back from his group was that a person doesn't have to be bit in order to become a zombie. A person just has to die, and they'll come back to life as a walker, as they call them. But him keeping this information from his group members really just hurts them in the long run, because I feel like they would have, by sharing this information, they would have been able to make better decisions. They would have been able to communicate better. The motivated sharing paradigm argues that not all of the group members have all the information or a concrete understanding, and this explains why some groups are bad at sharing necessary or even crucial information. I believe if Rick had shared this information earlier, more of his group members from the beginning would have been alive to later seasons. In season 2 of The Walking Dead, we are introduced to the farm, which is Hershel's farm. And this is where Rick almost loses his son, Carl, and everyone is looking to him for answers. And he does most of the talking to the owner, which is Hershel. Because Rick was a member of law enforcement before, he is able to handle these life-threatening situations, and he is able to think fast on his feet. And that's why people look to him as a leader, because he is also building those relationships within the group. The group communication climate just means that the social atmosphere that the group members create arises from them communicating and listening. And there's a lot of tension whenever they're on the farm, and there's a lot of secrets being held, such as that the girl that they were looking for, her name is Sophia, she was in the barn the whole time, and she was dead. At the very end of season 2, or somewhere in between season 2 and 3, somewhere in there, he tells everyone that he is in charge, and if they don't like it, they can leave. This basically becomes a Ricktatorship. In the 3rd season, we basically see Rick struggle with the idea of being leader, as he basically told everyone that they must follow what he says, and he starts to neglect his relationships with other group members after he loses his wife during childbirth. What this season really does is breaks down Rick as a character, and through this break, he decides to step down as leader and not to interfere as much. In the season, we also meet other characters that help Rick build back his relationships and build back his communication with his group members. In order for there to be a positive and supporting climate, there must be empathy, equality, and even trust. In this climate, a group strives for answers and solutions that benefit the group and their objectives. Whereas cohesiveness is when group members desire to remain in the group through development of belonging. The advantage of group cohesiveness is that it acts as a bonding agent, and it is no longer just I, but we. Members of Grimes' group have cognitive trust in him because they see that he is reliable and dependable, and also has the most experience due to his background. In the 6th season, we are now in a new community named Alexandria, and they are facing their biggest rivals yet, the Saviors, which are being led by Negan, one of the most infamous antagonists in the show. It is in the season finale that we see Rick keep a lot of information to himself, mainly that he knows that something bad is going to happen and that he is losing hope. This season really is where The Walking Dead lost a lot of their followers, a lot of their viewers, because they killed off Glenn, and his death was left on a cliffhanger. So the season 6 finale, they have all of the main characters, all of the inner group that Rick has been protecting and leading for the past 6 seasons. They have them all lined up, and at the very end, they have Negan hit one of them with a bat. And we don't see who he killed until months later, whenever the season 7 was released. The first episode of season 7 was released. The group's communication was highlighted in these episodes and played a very important part to how the rest of the show would go on. After season 6, there would be 5 more seasons that I personally have not finished. But there also is a few spin-offs that they don't have as much raving reviews or as many people watching them either.